Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernier bus train. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. Inside Elizabeth Warren's secret big donor fan club. Elizabeth Warren prohibits special access for big donors, but her campaign treasurer and another close ally are organizing wealthy supporters for Warren behind the scenes while she rips on the rich. The pair, Boston businessman Paul Egerman and activist Shanti Fry, have maintained campaign titles as Warren's finance co-chairs, even as her campaign sheared other links to the Democratic donor class earlier this year by forswearing closed-door, in-person fundraising events of the sort Warren did for years in the Senate. Fry and Egerman, a longtime friend of Warren's who helped build support for her first run for office, are courting big donors in the Northeast by organizing trips, hosting events, and acting as conduits for information about the campaign. This is a Politico article by Maggie Severns, November 18th. So this just came out. So these two, their presence on Warren's unorthodox campaign shows how the Massachusetts senator, whose campaign is funded primarily by small dollar online donors and who rails against the corrosive influence of political donors and Wall Street billionaires, even selling a campaign mug labeled "Billionaire Tears" on the side, is not completely blowing up her ties to the Democratic establishment. Egerman, her campaign treasurer, is a prolific political donor himself, and the wealthy supporters Egerman and Fry are organizing today may have another act to play in Warren's campaign. If she became the nominee, those donors may help finance the National Democratic Party, which can collect six-figure sums and which Warren has said she would raise money for if chosen as the nominee, or help super PACs that would support Warren against President Donald Trump. And their efforts highlight how some wealthy donors, especially progressives in her Boston base, have continued to embrace Warren, undaunted by the calls for a wealth tax and Medicare for all, in quotes, that have recently prompted furious criticism from Wall Street. Last week, a crowd of Bostonians packed into the trendy Tiger Mama restaurant for a brunch benefiting Warren's campaign without Warren herself, per campaign policy. Instead, the event, which focused on LGBTQ support and was open to small and large dollar donors, had the next best thing, a cardboard cutout of Warren, as well as FaceTime with Egerman and Fry. People are doing lots of events. There's enormous enthusiasm for her, said Elise Cherry, a Boston-based donor who helped organize the event. The screaming coming from Wall Street, it has not changed the enthusiasm one bit. Well, the Wall Street enthusiasm is there. It's just quiet. They need to scream in public, but in private, they're getting right behind her. And the signaling won't help. She's doing these kinds of signaling things, but what she's also signaling is to the donor class. She's signaling to them, hey, my Medicare for all isn't really Medicare for all. And let me show you here quietly, and you'll figure it out. And then you'll be fine. You'll relax. Crystal Ball. Warren ditches Medicare for all for Pete Care. I thought that was clever. Pete Care.
And that's not just for people who don't have insurance. It's for people who have insurance.
I'm with Bernie. Of course, to be fair, it was always a bit questionable just how with Bernie she was on Medicare for All, since she insisted it was just a framework and went through elaborate and evasive maneuvers to avoid saying the word taxes with respect to the financing. But that didn't stop Biden, Buttigieg, and others from hitting her for her rhetorical embrace of Medicare for All. Warren weathered those hits from the right for months, and it has in fact cost her in the polls. A new CBS News poll of Iowa finds her falling to 4th and Pete rising. He's now actually beating her with college grads and those those who are paying a lot of attention to the race. Meanwhile, Bernie has plummeted to first place in the Hawkeye state. Should he drop out? Well, now that she's already taken the hit in the polls from the right, I guess Warren decided she really wants to get hit from the left too, because she's just released a Medicare for All transition plan, which just essentially co-ops Mayor Pete's Medicare for those who want it positioning. In a Medium post, she explains that first, I will fight to pass fast-track budget reconciliation legislation to create a true Medicare for All option that is free for tens of millions. And finally, no later than my third year in office, I will fight to pass legislation that would complete the transition to full Medicare for All. In other words, she wants to pass Pete's plan first, and then 3 years later get around to that whole Medicare for All thing. Or, for those visual learners, here is a meme version courtesy of Reddit and hat tip to friend of the show, Zed Jelani. So to be clear, after caving to BS Republican orthodoxy on taxes, she is now caving to neoliberalism, third way, and the health insurance industry on the very plan itself. Not only is it the wrong policy decision, it is a catastrophic political decision. And it really exposes a fundamental flaw in Elizabeth Warren's whole political approach and theory of change, something that, frankly, we've been talking about here for a while. Sure, it is a justifiable, theoretical idea to have a transition period to Medicare for All. If you were designing a policy in a hermetically sealed think tank with zero concern for political realities, you could maybe make an argument for it. But the idea politically that you're going to first pass a public option, something so challenging in and of itself that the Obama administration failed with a Senate supermajority and a large majority in the House, and then turn right around and pass Medicare for All, that is a farce. Remember, the second passage, the time that really actually counts, will be after a midterm election in which the party in power almost always loses ground. Yeah, great idea, Senator. It will already be unbelievably hard to pass Medicare for All once with a massive outside pressure campaign by an organized grassroots movement and a presidential mandate in the first 100 days of administration. In fact, it is so absurdly fanciful that it's hard to escape the conclusion that really this is a plan to avoid having to pass Medicare for All, not one to actually get us there.
There you go. I was hoping she'd get there because she's the only one. I'm looking at all these other leftist pundits and they're saying, I can't believe how stupid they are. Bill Maher, Bill Clinton, all these liberals, I can't believe how stupid they are. They don't get it. They just are so out of touch with the American worker. No, they're not. I mean, they know exactly what the suffering is. They know what the plight of the American worker is, but they get it. They get it. They're trying to stick it to us, just like George Carlin said. And Crystal gets it. Crystal understands.
In fact, it's really completely clear what she's trying to do here. In a long line of Democrats who say one thing in the primary and another in the general, This plan is a purely cynical ploy that allows Warren to say she's with Bernie in the primary, but then forget about that whole Medicare for All folly in the general. This is exactly like what Kamala tried to pull off by co-sponsoring Bernie's plan in the Senate, pretending for a second she supported it, and then coming up with a compromise position once she heard from her consultants, donors, and focus groups. And how did that work out for Kamala? She lost all credibility and began her never-to-be-recovered from dissent in the polls. That's the other reason why I say this plan exposes Warren's bad political instincts as much as her ill-fated DNA test. Everyone can see what she's up to here, and this kind of ham-handed, cynical political calculation absolutely disgusts voters. It looks even worse from Warren, who's supposed to be a populist authenticity candidate and not some poll-tested, donor-created amalgam of platitudes like Pete. Even Biden, while he has adopted the wrong approach by settling for a public option, at least he seems to sincerely believe in that approach. To be honest with you, I don't really have any idea what Elizabeth Warren actually believes on healthcare or will actually fight for, and that's as much of a problem for her as anything else. By the way, in what should be considered political malpractice, someone on her team actually admitted to the Washington Post that they had no idea they'd really have to talk about healthcare on the trail. That's right. One of the top candidates for the Democratic nomination was gobsmacked that they would have to have details on the top issue of the election cycle. An unnamed person close to the Warren camp told the Post, it wasn't really clear that we were going to be spending the fall drilling down on the details of her health care plan. They wanted to make sure they were stapling themselves to Medicare for All, but it wasn't clear that there was going to be much more to it than advocating for Bernie's plan. Now, let's be honest. Warren was actually in a better place when she was just stapling herself to Bernie's plan, as this unnamed source put it. Of course, it didn't take Bernie more than a couple hours to jam Warren on her new squishiness. At an event accepting the endorsement of National Nurses United, Sanders announced he would introduce Medicare for All in the first week of his presidency. And you know that he will. He said it again at his big rally in East LA on Saturday.
So today I tell you that on our first week in office, we are going to introduce Medicare for all single-payer legislation.
Okay. So now you see the difference. And if you still refuse to see it, then shame on you. I'm pretty much sure that you're not going to come around. You're not going to figure it out. You're just going to keep buying Elizabeth's craziness. Well, you're going to just keep buying her bullshit.
Warren promises gradual move to Medicare for all. Rivals dismiss Warren plan for the first 100 days. And so here's what's happening. Elizabeth Warren introduced her transition plan for Medicare for all, and she's basically saying that, of course, it'll take place within the first 100 days. The Democratic candidate basically is stating that it won't be immediately Medicare for all. Warren on Friday proposed a series of steps she would gradually move the country towards Medicare for all over the course of the 3 years. Warren's transition plan would first build on Obamacare, also known as Romney Care, also known as the health care plan that was set up by the
Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much. I almost forgot that. And so it's going to create a public health insurance option for low-income families, children under 18 with free or reduced premiums for those who make too much or qualify for free care. In a Medium post describing her plan, Warren acknowledged that moving to Medicare for all will take time. So here's her statement. Every serious proposal for Medicare for all contemplates a significant...
Yeah, here's her statement. I don't even have time for her statement. Because she doesn't mean it. To quote the great Senator Nina Turner, why settle for the copy when you could have the original? There's Pete. That was funny to call it Pete Care because that's just what it is. Now, let's pivot a little. Elizabeth Warren supports Juan Guaido, supports sanctions of Venezuela, says Maduro is starving his people even though she acknowledges that the U.S. has economic sanctions and that she supports those sanctions. She's horrible and a threat to Latin America. Now, Kate Johnstone will help us figure this all out. She says, if the agenda to oust Maduro was honest instead of dishonest. So these are Kate's words, just warning you. This is like an onion piece. This is Juan. If it was like the Jim Carrey movie, Liar, Liar. If this is the Liar, Liar version, where you have to tell the truth. If he were telling the truth, he would say, I would like to be regarded as the interim president of Venezuela because the current president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, stands opposed to the interests of the political bodies with which I have aligned myself. Also, he stands opposed to my own personal ambitions of becoming powerful. Washington, D.C. We too would like for Juan Guaido to be regarded as the interim president of Venezuela because the current president is too cozy in policy and practice with our geopolitical opponents. We would not mind this so much if Venezuela didn't sit atop the world's largest proven oil reserves. If we can't control what happens to those oil reserves, we won't be as dominant on the world stage as we otherwise would be. U.S. allies. We too would like it if Juan Guaido were president instead of Nicolas Maduro because that's what the United States wants and it is in our interests to go along with whatever they say. If we go along with Washington's dictates, we are treated favorably, whereas if we don't, we'll end up getting treated the way the Venezuelan government is being treated currently. Donald Trump. I've been told by the neoconservatives who I have appointed to guide my foreign policy that it would be good for America's resource control agendas if I apply more sanctions to Venezuela's economy at this time. This will force the Venezuelan civilians and, more importantly, their military to overthrow Maduro or else see their loved ones die of malnutrition and lack of health care. That's a heartfelt response. John Bolton. I too encourage Venezuela's citizens and military to turn against their government and begin inflicting violence upon it until Nicolas Maduro is either dead or removed from power. If you do this, you won't have to starve and die because of our steadily increasing sanctions, and we'll get to control the oil that your country happens to sit on top of. As an added benefit, hurting large numbers of human beings gives me sexual gratification. CIA via Bullhorn. Excuse me, Venezuelans, this is the CIA. Will you all please start having a civil war now to overthrow your government? That would make us very happy. Thank you. Mainstream media. The U.S. government, and of course the powerful unelected individuals who run it from behind the scenes without any accountability or oversight from the public, is attempting to topple Venezuela's only recognized government using starvation sanctions, CIA operations, and an open campaign to delegitimize the sitting president of that nation. They are doing this because controlling as much of the world's oil supplies as possible helps them to control the world, and controlling the world is the thing that they want to do. These are the things we would be telling you if we weren't owned by the same plutocratic class which owns the U.S. government. And on and on. Elliot Abrams, I almost certainly torture small rodents. That's probably the best one. Anyway, we can always count on Kate to tell us what's really happening. And Elizabeth also knows what's really happening. But she's on the wrong side. And we can close here with Barack Obama, who also knows exactly what's happening. This is from yesterday's show to just kind of finish it out.
At the same time, former President Obama made some comments. Let's take a listen to what he had to say to CNN.
This is still a country that is less revolutionary.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Than it is interested in improvement. They like seeing things improve.
Yeah, sure.
But the average American doesn't think that we have to completely tear down the system.
No.
And I think it's important for us not to lose sight of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right, Barack. Yeah, we don't have to completely tear down the system, because that's your system. And that's your money. And all the people who own you. Yeah, we don't want to tear that down. He was saying this to wealthy donors, if you remember. He is certainly not speaking for the pain and suffering of American workers. He's speaking right to his donors when he says this.
Fact check, false. 70% of Americans have a deep boiling anger at the political establishment. He went on to say that, there's a danger of listening to certain left-leaning Twitter feeds. Yes. I love the idea of him, lurking on leftist Twitter. It's pretty funny.
I have a theory. I think it's Matt Stoller. So I'm going to ask him that whenever he comes on the show, because there is nobody else I know who is more blatantly on the left and against Barack Obama. We'll leave that for another time. I mean, I do think that it just demonstrates how...
So anyway, there is Barack Obama still shilling for big money. Elizabeth Warren, right there, still shilling for big money for the CIA, for the imperialistic wars. She is not what you want. She is, as a lesser evil, she's as evil as the evil that we didn't want last time. We already know that 26% of Bernie supporters will vote, not that we're advocating for this, but will vote directly for Donald Trump if Elizabeth Warren is the nominee. So you can't have Elizabeth, even if you want her, but I don't know why you would want her. That's what really disturbs me. I'll keep telling you why you shouldn't want her, but even if you won't listen, you're still not going to get her. She can't win in the general election. But that's a different story for a different day. In the meantime, keep on burning and keep on busting, and I hope to see you tomorrow.
Get on board the Bernie bus train. Come get on board the Bernie bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board